Standing guard at night, you're told to watch for people, not for things that don't show up on patrol schedules. Story 1. I was a private first class on night watch at Forward Operating Base Coyote, a weather-worn outpost perched on a ridge overlooking the river valley in eastern Afghanistan. The post was a cluster of sandbagged barracks, a mess hall, and a dimly lit watchtower that rose above everything else like a lone finger pointing to the sky. My shift began at 2200 hours. The sun had already fled, and the only light was the thin, orange glow of the floodlights that swung lazily over the perimeter. The first hour passed in the usual rhythm. Sip the cold coffee, scan the night vision feed, note the distant howl of a jackal, and stare at the static-filled radio. At 11:15, the first thing that caught my eye was a faint, pulsing glint on the far side of the watchtower, something reflecting the floodlight. I squinted. It was a thin line of metallic sheen, like a piece of broken glass, half buried in the sand. I called it in over the radio. "NCO, I've got a reflective object near the north berm. Could be a discarded can or..." The reply was a static-filled, "Copy. Keep an eye on it." I climbed down the ladder, flashlight in hand, and approached the spot. The sand was dry, crunching under my boots. The object was a small, dented metal can, its lid twisted open, the contents spilling out in a thin line of rust-colored powder. I turned it over. There was a faint imprint of a shoe sole pressed into the powder, a pattern I didn't recognize. No military boot tread, more like the shallow, irregular ridge of a civilian sneaker. I reported it again, and the sergeant on duty, a grizzled veteran named Torres, sent a patrol to investigate. By the time they returned, the can was gone, the powder smoothed over by the wind. No one could explain where it had come from, but the tone in the radio grew tighter. Everyone seemed to be listening a little harder to the faint rustle of the night. An hour later, the night vision monitors flickered. A brief surge of static turned the screen into a kaleidoscope of grainy gray. When the image returned, a figure stood at the far edge of the perimeter, too far to be a person, too close to be a shadow. It was a movement, a ripple in the sand, as if someone had walked across the berm and then stopped, turned, and vanished. No one could confirm the exact location. The video feed was garbled, and the recording was blank. The hours dragged on. Every few minutes a low metallic clank echoed from the east, like a chain dragging across concrete. I checked the perimeter, nothing but the wind moving the loose metal shutters. Yet the sound persisted, growing louder, then stopping abruptly. By 0300, the floodlights flickered, stuttered, and went out, leaving only the thin, ghostly glow of the night vision. In that dimness, the sand seemed to shift beneath my boots, as if something, or someone, was moving just out of sight. When the lights finally snapped back, the watchtower's interior was empty, but the floorboards were scuffed, as if someone had paced across them. My radio whispered static, then a distant muffled call. "All units, return to base. Emergency." I ran. The night was thick with the scent of dust and something else, something metallic, almost like blood, that lingered in the air after I left the tower. Back at the mess, the NCO asked me if I'd seen anything, and I shook my head, because I didn't know what to say. Now, weeks later, the can and the strange shoe prints are still a mystery. The floodlights still flicker at odd moments, and sometimes, when the wind is just right, I swear I hear a faint dragging sound, as if someone is still pulling a chain across the sand, waiting for a night that never ends. The question that haunts me isn't, what was it? But, why did it stop when we left? Story 2. They call it the quiet job, guarding this ice-choked ridge where the only enemies are frostbite and boredom. My post is a steel hut the size of a closet, wedged between two snowdrifts that swallow the door each hour. I check my rifle's safety switch for the 10th time. On, off, on. The motion detector hums like a wasp in my ear. First disturbance comes at 0200. A tap, tap, tap on the observation window. I freeze. Snow shouldn't tap. My breath clouds the glass. No hand, no face, just the endless white. I radio the main compound. Static. Of course. Their heaters are priority, not comms. I step outside. The wind slaps my face, sharp as a drill sergeant's belt. The snow around the hut is smooth, unbroken. Back inside, I slam the door. Not hard, just enough. My reflection in the window shivers. Wait. No, the window's moving. A draft? But when I check the seal, my fingers come away wet. The inside of the door is melting. At 03:45, the lights flicker. Flurries of snow speckle the floor, though the storm outside is calm. I trace the leak to the ceiling vent, a rusted maintenance hatch. I kick it. Nothing. But up close, the ice coating is scored with parallel lines, like fingernails dragging across ceiling tiles. My own nails dig into my palms. You're tired, I think. You'll hallucinate rats in the quiet. Then the whispers start. Not radio static, not the wind. A voice, low and frayed, murmuring in what sounds like English, but isn't. I grab my helmet mic. Bryce, outpost to base. Read? Silence. The voice persists, just beneath comprehension. I follow the sound to the supply closet. Inside, my duffel bag is open. My toothbrush, half my rations, a photo of my daughter, gone. The whispers stop. The door to the closet clicks shut. By 0500, I'm awake everywhere. My boots leave prints on the inside of the walls. The motion detector beeps steadily, though the screen shows no blips. I try to sleep, but the mattress feels alive, like coiled springs breathing. I sit up. The room is colder. My watch says 0513. The photo of my daughter is on the floor. I swear it was in the closet. They'll chalk this up to hypothermia, or stress. Maybe I'll get a desk job for sanity's sake. But when the convoy arrives at dawn, none of them mention the fresh boot prints leading into the snowdrifts. Prints that end, neatly, at the hut's door. They'll say I'm tired. They'll say I'm fine. But when I hand them the photo, still cold to the touch, they'll pause. Just a second. Just enough to make me wonder if they've seen this before. And if they're lying to me. If they're all lying. About what's buried in the ice or what's awake. Story 3. I was 24, fresh out of basic, and my first assignment was a night watch at Forward Operating Base Coyote, a sand-scarred outpost perched on the edge of a desert valley in Afghanistan. The base was a tangle of concrete bunkers, a single mess hall, and a ring of barbed wire that seemed to hug the perimeter like a restless python. My post was the North Watchtower, a rust-stained metal silo that gave me a 360-degree view of the dark horizon, the only thing that kept me from feeling completely swallowed by the night. The first watch was routine. I checked the perimeter lights, 4 amber beacons flickering at 10-second intervals, tested the motion sensors, confirmed the infrared cameras were rolling, and logged the temperature at 47 degrees Fahrenheit. The desert wind whispered across the dunes, pulling sand into the crevices of the tower. I sipped stale coffee, trying to steady the jitter in my fingers. At 100 hours, the first oddity occurred. The southern motion sensor, which had been silent for the entire watch, chirped a brief, high-pitched alarm. I glanced at the monitor. A single pixel flickered on the screen, a speck of white against the black. My heart jumped, but the reading vanished as quickly as it had appeared. I whispered into my radio. Got a false trigger on sensor 4, over. The reply was static and a distant chuckle from Sergeant Ramirez. Probably a jackrabbit, man. Keep it tight. I pressed the button to reset the sensor, but the display stayed dark. I shrugged it off. The desert is full of mirages, insects, and the occasional errant dune-shifting wind that can fool even the best equipment. I turned back to my coffee, but the cup was colder than when I'd set it down. I took a sip, feeling the bitterness as if the coffee itself were a warning. Around 0230, the wind shifted. The hum of the generators, a low, constant thrum that usually lulled me into a kind of half-sleep, stopped. The darkness became absolute. No distant hum, no low-frequency vibrations through the metal floor. I tapped the emergency battery panel, but the indicator lights didn't flicker. The tower felt like a coffin. I radioed the main post. "Power's gone on my side. Request assistance." The reply was delayed, then a crackle. "Copy J2. Stay where you are. We're checking the grid." I waited, eyes scanning the barren landscape, listening for any sound beyond the wind. For a moment, I thought I heard a faint, rhythmic thumping, like a footstep, just beyond the perimeter fence. I strained, but the sound faded into the wind's sigh. 30 minutes later, the generators roared back to life, the lights flickered, and the motion sensor lit up again, showing nothing. The radio buzzed. "All clear on our end. Looks like a circuit breaker tripped. Anything else?" I answered, "Negative. Tower's fine." The truth was that the thump had not been a footstep. It was the sound of the metal tower settling, a subtle groan as the temperature dropped. Yet the unease lingered, a knot in my stomach that wouldn't loosen. When I finally descended at sunrise, the desert revealed no tracks, no footprints, no evidence of an intruder. The sensor's log showed a single, unexplained activation. The watchtower's metal floor bore a faint, fresh scratch, barely noticeable, but it caught the light just enough to make me wonder what had grazed it. Back in the mess hall, over stale biscuits, the other guards laughed about the ghost rabbit story. I smiled, but the question stayed with me. In a place where every sensor, every wire, and every sound is accounted for, what else could have brushed the tower's side in the dead of night? And why did the tower settle as if some weight had just been lifted? I never got an answer.